And Bill Spalding here with you for the Ivy League, and today we have the privilege to talk with 5 Ivy alums who are making a difference in the lives of kids around the country through their work with Beat the Streets. Beat the Streets is a collection of city-based nonprofit organizations that improves the opportunities for underprivileged youth and communities across America by motivating a passion for exceptional work, honesty, teamwork, and persistence through the sport of wrestling. Locations currently in Philadelphia, New York City, Providence, Chicago, Los Angeles, Cleveland, Lancaster, Boston, and the Bay Area. With us today, we got a great panel of folks that are involved. We'll start by introducing Mike Novogratz, Princeton class of '87. He's the chairman and founder of Beat the Streets and launched Beat the Streets New York. Was the team leader for USA Wrestling from 2009 to 2012, and a National Wrestling Hall of Famer. Clinton Motter, University of Penn, class of '97 alum, is the National Executive Committee Chair of Beat the Streets, the Philadelphia Board of Directors Chair, and the Vice Chairperson for the Athletic Board of Overseers at Penn. Kira Trotta-Berry is a Columbia alum. She is the president of the board of Beat the Streets and was the team leader for the 2016 U.S. Women's Wrestling Olympic team, also the chair of the Columbia College Alumni Association. We have Billy Watterson, Brown class of 2014, who started Beat the Streets Providence in 2013. And is on the Providence Board of Directors. And then we have Ben Reiter, a UPenn alum, and Ben is the Beat the Streets Senior Director of Philadelphia, doing a lot of work on the ground in Philadelphia. All right, I want to welcome you all. Thanks so much for being here. Mike, I know I want to get to you first to just kind of start broadly about the roots of Beat the Street and the mission of what your group is trying to do.
You know, like anything, these things usually have a kind of a random start. I had a friend that asked me if I would coach the 7th, 8th grade kids at a charter school in wrestling, and I hadn't wrestled in a few years. I just got back from Hong Kong, and so I, went down to this small gym in a public facility in New York and started smashing a bunch of 8th graders around, having a lot of fun. And one of the fathers was complaining about no wrestling at the middle school and asked me if I'd help buy a mat. And so I started by buying a mat to one middle school in New York. And the program started looking like we had a program. And there was a guy named Al Bevilacqua who, is a lot, but he had a huge amount of energy. And he had this vision to Beat the Streets, that we should do this in all the schools. And so we started really scaling it up in New York. In simple terms, it was, wrestlers are tough kids, and they usually come from tough, backgrounds, Pennsylvania farm boys, Iowa kids. But there was very little urban wrestling. And I kept thinking urban kids are tough, and they're missing out on this experience of wrestling. And that wrestling, almost more than any other sport, though all sports give you this, really forces a toughness and a discipline on its participants. If the program is created right, between cutting weight and exercise and getting the crap beat out of you day in and day out, you develop grit. And resilience and toughness are the characteristics that leaders are made of. There's 13 ex-presidents of the United States that were wrestlers. There's a whole litany of people that you've looked at that have done impressive things. The guys that took down the planes over 9/11 were wrestlers. And so we thought, let's create this army of heroes in waiting. Dan Gable gives this great speech, America Needs Wrestling. And I remember I was at Brown actually for their 100th anniversary. And I was like, America needs Ivy League wrestling. And then young Billy, who was literally 19 years old, I think, came up and said, I want to do this in Providence. And, I think maybe I bought him a wrestling mat or gave him 10 grand or 5 grand or something, but he built it on his own. And so what I think is kind of cool, wrestling is not necessarily seen as an Ivy League sport, but it is an Ivy League sport. And the guys that came from the Ivy League, went out and on their own and started these programs to try to change kids' lives. And so, that Gable idea of America Needs Wrestling, I said it, America Needs Ivy League Wrestling. And I'm kind of proud to be one of the, Akira should get just as much credit. She basically ran Beat the Streets New York and has built women's wrestling, both at the high school and now the college level, as much as any woman. She wasn't even a wrestler, though she married one, which kind of makes you a wrestler. And one of both her sons are college wrestlers. And so, you got Columbia, Penn, Brown, and Princeton our executive director at Beat the Streets New York was a Harvard kid at one point. And so I just think it's cool that there's this fraternity of wrestlers that broadly care about the same thing. It's kind of giving back and try to change kids' lives. So I'll stop there. That was kind of my rant.
Yeah.
But pitch it to, either, Clint or Billy or whoever.
Billy, I'll go to you next. And if afterwards, Kira and Ben, you all want to jump in, just your origin stories of what inspired you to get involved with Beat the Streets, and Billy, for you to start up the Providence program basically from scratch.
Yeah, for me, it really does connect all the folks who are either Ivy wrestlers or, connected to Brown University. I got dragged into a Providence middle school when I was a freshman at Brown on the wrestling team by a Brown wrestling alumni, Chris Ayers. I'd grown up with a relatively privileged background and just got pulled into a Providence middle school for the first time and just saw this radically different version of that of education than what I'd had, and kind of took my blinders off and kept me coming back and made me a regular volunteer. But I really didn't feel like I was moving the needle. And then, I started talking to kids and realized that there was really no sports at the Providence middle school level for the most part. And then I also saw what Mike and Kira were doing in New York and was like, we need this here in Providence. And luckily I had Mike's phone number because I'd actually interviewed him for Brown Bear magazine at that 100-year anniversary of Brown wrestling, when he helped save our program. And he gave that speech that he talked about earlier. And I called him up and I was kind of expecting someone to come do this basically, because I knew there were programs in other places. I remember I called Mike up and I was like, we need to Beat the Streets in Providence. And he was like, you should do it. Go do it. And he did cut us our first check so we could get a wrestling mat. And another Brown alumni, Jennifer Wood, who was a martial artist and was my boss at the time at the Lieutenant Governor's office, helped us figure out how to start a nonprofit and get into our first school. And we were kind of off to the races from there.
Ben, on this call, you're the one person who this is your full-time job. You are a staff member on the ground with Beat the Streets in Philadelphia, having the day-to-day interaction with all these kids. Can you talk a bit about what the day-to-day work of Beat the Streets is like? What type of kids you come in contact with, and the challenges that they face that you try to help them, learn how to overcome through wrestling?
So I'm a Penn Wrestling alum as well. I graduated in 2009. I after graduating college, I went right into the social impact sector, but in South America. And I lived in Peru for 7 years, helping build community centers and do lots of great work there. And then when I moved my family back to the States, I was following the work that everyone on this call has been doing from abroad during that time, because wrestling really shaped me as an individual. So it was easy to understand how the impact potential is there. It's just a sport that's packed full of life lessons. It's a metaphor for life. It really is. It's one of those, you learn how to navigate challenges, you learn how to overcome adversity, you learn humility, you learn how to believe in yourself, you learn all these things that just help you no matter what path you're taking. So those are the lessons that we embrace as an organization, and we're really intentional about kind of extracting those lessons through the sport, connecting them to life, and then you get those aha moments with our youth that they're just like, yeah, okay, I could do anything. I could just go after all sorts of really ambitious goals, and that's what we're seeing. We have alum from Beat the Streets that are also either Ivy League graduates or current students as well. And I mean, and just on just a variety of, we have alum that have gone on to be our country's heroes and just do and give back to their community. And I'm inspired every day by that. But answering your question of just what we see on the ground level, it's, we partner with schools and community centers to offer the sport of wrestling, but in a way that really focuses on the life lessons that live within that sport. And then we also have a really strong mentoring component where we're connecting our volunteers, our college wrestling volunteers, or senior level volunteers, or we're getting them connected with youth across Philadelphia in a one-on-one mentoring relationship, and bridging those levels of sports becomes something that's just really, really impactful, and we're seeing the results just with our, any of our individual youth, and then across the board, we have our 98% of youth in Philadelphia that come through Beat the Streets are graduating high school, and the average in Philadelphia is only 68%. So we're seeing really, really big changes there.
Well, I'd love to hear from all of you about this, but Ben, I think starting with you will make some sense here, since again you're seeing it most directly. But the challenges of the COVID pandemic obviously have hit kids in the city maybe even harder than anywhere else. More schools that are closed, less resources, less meals, things like that. How have you been able to adapt the program to still meet some of the needs that these kids have during the pandemic?
Yeah, one of the things that I just immediately loved about being part of the Beat the Streets family and culture is that the focus is really, what's the best thing to do for each and every individual youth that we're serving, right? And we adapt to that. And COVID was certainly a time where we need to embrace that mindset. And what we did off the bat, we moved all of our virtual mentoring program, really built that out. We collaborated with cities across the country to participate in a Millions Minute Challenge, where we're posting workouts, and youth, the Beat the Streets community members are logging in their workout times, and we got to over 1 million minutes of participation there. We were out delivering meals to youth and families, just every week, working with local sponsors, with Revolution Foods and the child care resources, to get these meals out to our youth and families every week. We're connecting youth with resources, lending out Chromebooks, and just really trying to meet, just listening to our youth and trying to meet their needs and be there for them first and foremost. Because like you said, like you started the question out, it hits this pandemic hit at-risk urban communities the hardest.
Oh, sorry, Kira, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think one of the things that COVID really showed up has been, a couple of years ago, the Beat the Streets programs we all knew each other, but started individually and, coming together as a national organization. So, and I think during COVID, we really saw the benefit of that, so that not only as this shared experience by so many of the Beat the Streets have been, founded by folks who competed against each other, knew each other from the Ivy League, but also the fact that they now work together and support each other, and there's a network and there's a formalized structure that allows that. So each of the Beat the Streets is very independent and is able to kind of reflect what's going on in the community that they serve, but they have the benefit of all of the knowledge and experience that every other Beat the Streets is having. And I think, that's really one of the remarkable things about these, long relationships that we have, and that so many of the board members and the staff, having come through the Ivy League, either as coaches, Beat the Streets New York executive director is a former Columbia coach. Another Columbia coach is heading up Beat the Streets LA. There is a very strong network of people who work together for a long time and can support each other.
And Clint, for you, it's been 11 years since Beat the Streets Philly was launched back in 2009. What has the work and the challenge been like to continue to grow your program and present the opportunity to more kids?
I think we started in 2007 by filing the paperwork and getting the organization structured to allow it to exist. I think the basic principles that we focused on in terms of setting up Beat the Streets Philadelphia and the way we think about running it to this day. One, first and foremost, your focus on the needs of the student athletes themselves above all else. That's a guiding principle that the organization is predicated upon. So when decisions need to be made organizationally, it always comes back to that very basic idea of what's going to best benefit the student athletes within our program. And then a second, I think what I would say is a core principle of the way we think about running the organization is we want to be able to sustain what it is that we're offering to the student athletes in perpetuity. That requires you to be able to set up a scalable and a repeatable process to ultimately to provide that experience for the kids in our program. And what I think that led us to do is we started relatively slowly in terms of building we had one team, then we built a second team, and we make sure we understood how to run that team properly. I think we've been extremely intentional about the way that we've partnered with both the University of Pennsylvania and Drexel University in the city of Philadelphia. And we have the benefit of having two Division I wrestling programs right next to one another. We have strategic partnerships with the Pennsylvania RTC to be able to again bridge the gap between all levels of the sport, which I think has been really meaningful. But it's been being in some ways clinical in the way that you run the program. As passionate as I am about the sport of wrestling, and as passionate as we all are, everyone on this call, you know, when you're thinking about trying to fund and deal with the challenges of running an organization properly, and that's really, it's a responsibility that you take on when you do try to help serve kids in any program. You have to do it properly. You have to do it well. And we take that responsibility extremely seriously to try to make sure that we can sustain that, provide a high quality level of a mentoring experience, of an athletic experience, and ultimately help student athletes and the kids in our program get to somewhere better than they thought was otherwise possible. And if we can focus on that, and we can be able to do that in an efficient manner, then we can sustain that, you know, long beyond my own personal involvement in this. I mean, it's my hopes that ultimately we can create, you know, we can create programs within Philadelphia and across the entire country that will last in perpetuity long beyond any of our singular involvement in it.
I would love to hear, I know the reason that you guys do this is for the kids and to help the kids improve their situation in life and use wrestling to, you know, do better in all aspects of life. So I would love to hear any, I know you're not supposed to have favorites, but if you have like any specific stories, especially for those of you who've now been with the program long enough to see groups of kids go from, you know, being kids, being 12 or 13-year-olds to now being full-grown adults, and the type of direct impact you've seen on specific kids and how it's changed their life to where they are now as adults.
In terms of, there's a whole host of stories that I think every one of us could probably tell with regards to individuals, you know, transcending all types of really, really challenging circumstances. And I think some of it comes in the form of athletic achievement, you know, and that's exciting to watch. We've had a couple of kids. We had a student athlete win the Greco-Roman national championship this past summer, which is pretty exciting. Winning world medals, winning all types of different levels, qualifying for whatever tournament they were aspiring to do. And then simultaneously, you have some kids who you teach how to read. And by teaching somebody like a basic skill, just basically how to read, you're changing the trajectory of that child's life in a very, very meaningful way, which is really exciting. But I always come back to one story that for me is the most meaningful, and it's a gentleman by the name of Harold Anderson. And I first met him when he was a seventh grader at the Belmont Charter School in West Philadelphia, and I came into a room. And it's a really special moment when you're able. I was just sitting in the stands. It was a practice, and I'd been speaking with one of the coaches before the practice, and I was just sitting there, kind of over along the side, and I watched the group of kids come into the room, and you could tell very, very clearly that Harold was just a natural born leader of young men and women. Even as a seventh grader, he was everybody there was effectively just kind of watching to see what he was doing, which was really special to watch. So, you know, we were able to, Beat the Streets was able to help him navigate the process of going from middle school to high school. And he managed to get into a charter school and did very, very well. He was the first student athlete that we actually asked to speak at any one of our own benefits, because we've been always relatively protective about putting kids in that type of a situation. But he's a really, really, really talented young man. So he came up to New York and he spoke to a group of people up in New York. It was a big party. I think Mike, you were probably there for this, but we have an event every year in New York City. And he got up and you know, I got the room to quiet down. I was lucky enough to be the one to introduce him. And he said, you know, hi, my name's Harold Anderson. I'm currently a student at the Belmont Charter School, and next year I'll be attending the Wharton School of Business. And the whole room kind of just went bananas, and it just went everyone got really, really excited. And, you know, Harold went on to give just an absolutely just fantastic speech about what wrestling meant to him. And there were a couple of specific comments that I can recall just off the top of my head. This is several years ago now, but he spoke about the idea that wrestling brought him to the brink of his purpose. And when he got up to that edge and he looked over into the abyss, he could either decide to jump in or turn around and go back. And he decided to jump in. And to me, that's almost Shakespearean in the way that he described that. But I think that that's a really wonderful way of describing the challenges and the metaphor of life that wrestling provides you the opportunity to really embrace. The other thing that he said that was just unbelievable to me, that really, really had a lasting impact on me. He spoke about coming up to different kind of obstacles in his youth, and he lived in it's a challenging environment in certain parts of urban environments in West Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is no different than a lot of other places. It's a challenging environment. He dealt with his share of challenges, and he said when he came up to those doors that presented those challenges, and he was able to push them through, he always made sure to prop the door open so the kids behind him could come through. And that to me is just that is prophetic. That is really, really a special concept for somebody that young to be able to understand what it is that they're doing and to be able to provide that pathway for other student athletes to follow him through that door. He's a special young man, and I just consider myself lucky to be able to have helped him a little bit and to have watched him progress. So he's going to be a Wharton School of Business graduate relatively soon. So that's pretty special stuff.
Those moments that inspire me the most is when youth or families or alum will talk about Beat the Streets as a family. They'll use the word family. They'll use the word safe haven. Those hearing that from our kids or from our alum or from families of our youth is always, I always just kind of that energy that fuels me. I feel like, okay, we're doing something right. We got to make sure that we fulfill that promise, that we're there for them. That's a serious honor, blessing, and responsibility, right? When somebody views you as family or as a safe haven, or using those words. So those are moments that I can't count how many times we've heard that, and every time I hear it, it just feels like it's inspirational fuel for us to just all keep doing what we're doing and grow that and make sure that what we're doing is available to more youth that need us. And then the second kind of pattern that we touched on earlier that just always inspires me too is just seeing our alumni come and give back and be like older brothers and sisters to our younger student athletes. That concept that Harold talked about in the speech, where he props the door open, and that exists. And I think it comes from that family culture, and we have just so many, every one of our alumni that's in the Philadelphia area is back getting on the mat with coach, with their younger peers, meeting with youth in the mentoring center, showing them like that. Those moments are so powerful because it shows our youth that, hey, I could do this too.
It's really obvious that you all are making an impact in kids' life. So for anyone who's maybe watched this and now feels called or inspired to help, what can they do to help Beat the Streets reach its mission, be it volunteering, be it financial support? What are the things that you as an organization most need right now?
I think what's going on right now across the country and across the world, in terms of the social change that's ongoing, and then in this pandemic that we're dealing with, I think the services and the programming that's being provided by Beat the Streets locally, regionally, nationally is more important now than it ever has been in the past. And I don't think that's an overstatement. I think that the opportunity to help fill the gaps in children's lives at this point, and there are plenty of gaps, is very, very real. And if you're able to create a thoughtful way from a programming standpoint on being able to address some of those, I think that's a tremendous opportunity. It's a tremendous responsibility, and it's a real blessing. I think that the opportunity for anybody who wants to get involved, whether or not it's financial, if it's you can donate your time, and as Kira pointed out, across, and whether you're going to do that regionally on the national level, there's a whole variety of different avenues by which you can choose to participate and beat the streets. I think that the most important decision is to begin and start and not be intimidated by it. So ultimately trying to become the change that you want to see in the world and being willing to step forth and contribute whatever it is that you're capable of contributing. If that's financial, fantastic. If that's your time, your energy, your expertise, there are ways that you can contribute to something bigger than yourself, and ultimately help again create that change that you want to see out there. And I think Beat the Streets, amongst a whole host of other philanthropic activities and organizations, I think we're doing the best we possibly can in an intelligent manner, and we're creating a whole host of opportunities for student athletes to change their lives, and that's pretty exciting.
Great. Well, we really appreciate your time and all the work you do. Thanks so much for spending time with us today to share your mission.